What does it take to turn humiliation into triumph in the span of 5 minutes? In the dim light of a Georgia courtroom, Aisha Carter stood alone, her wrists bound by cold steel handcuffs. The air was thick with the weight of judgment, not just from the judge perched high on the bench, but from the eyes of strangers in the gallery, their whispers cutting sharper than the cuffs. Aisha, a 32-year-old schoolteacher, had been arrested for a crime she didn't commit, a mistaken identity tied to a petty theft charge. Yet here she was, forced to her knees by two officers who gripped her arms like she was a threat to the very order of the room. The judge, a stern man with a face carved from years of routine, didn't look up from his papers. "Order," he muttered, as if her kneeling was just another formality. Aisha's heart pounded, but her eyes burned with defiance. She wasn't a criminal. She was a daughter, a sister, a woman who spent her days shaping young minds in a classroom adorned with colorful posters and hope. She taught her students to stand tall, to speak truth, to never let the world dim their light. Now, as her knees pressed into the hardwood floor, she felt the weight of those lessons. She would not break. Not here. Not today. The courtroom was a theater of silence, save for the rustle of papers and the occasional cough. The prosecutor, a young man with a crisp suit and an air of ambition, began reading the charges. "Theft of property, value exceeding $500, he declared, his voice sharp. Aisha's gaze flickered to the gallery, where her mother sat, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles paled. The shame of the moment was a blade, but Aisha refused to let it cut deeper. She straightened her spine, even on her knees, and whispered to herself, "This is not my story." Then came the twist of voice from the back of the room, trembling but clear. "Your Honor, I need to speak." All eyes turned to a teenage boy, no older than 16, standing in the gallery. His school uniform was slightly wrinkled, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He was one of Aisha's students, Jamal, a quiet kid who rarely spoke up in class, but whose essays brimmed with raw, unfiltered truth. The judge raised an eyebrow, unaccustomed to interruptions. "This better be good, young man," he said. Jamal stepped forward, his voice gaining strength. "Miss Carter didn't steal anything. I was there. I saw the woman who took that bag from the story. It wasn't her. Miss Carter was helping me with my math homework at the community center that day. I swear it." He pulled out his phone, hands shaking, and showed a time-stamped photo. Aisha, smiling, pointing at a worksheet while Jamal grinned beside her. The courtroom stirred, murmurs rippling like a stone dropped in still water. The prosecutor faltered, his confidence cracking. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Aisha's mother let out a choked sob. The judge, for the first time, looked directly at Aisha, his expression unreadable. "Is this true?" he asked. Aisha nodded, her voice steady despite the tears brimming in her eyes. "I was with my student. I've never stolen anything in my life." The judge called for a recess to verify Jamal's evidence. 5 minutes later, the room reconvened. The charges were dropped. The prosecutor's face flushed with embarrassment as he muttered an apology. The officers, now silent, removed Aisha's handcuffs. But the moment that defined the day came next. As Aisha rose to her feet, rubbing her wrists, the judge stood. Slowly, one by one, the people in the gallery followed her mother, Jamal, even strangers who had whispered moments before. The prosecutor hesitated, then stood too. The officers remained seated, their heads bowed. Aisha stood at the center of it all, her heart swelling with a quiet, fierce pride. She hadn't just been freed, she had been seen. Jamal's courage, her own resilience, and the truth had rewritten the narrative in that courtroom. She looked at her student, her eyes shining with gratitude, and nodded. He'd learned her lessons well. As she walked out of the courtroom, head high, Aisha carried more than her freedom. She carried the weight of every person who had ever been misjudged, every voice that had been silenced. And she knew, in that moment, that her story, her real story, was just beginning. Yindi.